Absolutely. I'm Kelly Cousineau. I'm an assistant principal at the middle school level in Central Florida. Been a principal. This is my 7th year as a school leader, school principal.
So how did you get in the field of education?
So, education is my second career. I came into education at 32. I was initially going to go into education just out of high school. And I can remember senior year of high school, I had a guidance counselor who I really loved and admired, made a comment to me that, so at the time, I graduated high school in 1992 and in Michigan. So in the time of 1992 in Michigan, there weren't a whole lot of teaching jobs available. And he kind of talked me out of it. Not ill intended, but just we had a conversation. He's like, what are you going to do? I didn't really know what I was going to do after high school. And I said, I think I've always wanted to be a teacher. I think being a teacher would be something fulfilling, something I would enjoy doing. And he kind of nudged me away from it just because of what was happening in the state at that time. If I knew what I knew now about education being a little cyclical, jobs come and go. It just depends on that season. I would have felt different, but I didn't know at the time. So I went into business administration. I worked in advertising, loved my career there. I started having babies, stayed home with our kiddos when they were little. And just to get out of the house a little bit, I would substitute teach and loved being in a school environment. Just absolutely fell in love with it. There was just something that I felt so connected and drawn to, especially at the secondary level. Never really thought I would go into teaching still. We lived in Michigan. We moved our family to Florida in 2006 and just happened to, the right pieces came together, had a conversation with someone around could I go into teaching with what I have for credentials in the state at the time. I could get a temporary certificate and teach for a period of 5 months before I had to take certain tests and fulfill a couple of courses to be able to do it full time. And I jumped right in and taught 8th grade science. Absolutely loved it. Taught in the classroom for 8 years. Stepped out of that role to move into a district coaching position. And then that led to an assistant principalship and then to principalship.
Wow, that's in a nutshell. That's everything right there.
That's
Let, let's
everything.
let's
That's
unpack some of that. Let's unpack some of that. Let's talk about being 32 and then starting a new career.
yeah.
Being
So
32 and starting a new career. Let's talk about that. How was that?
what was say that again, John?
How was that?
So it was scary and it was exciting, and there was something immediately that I loved about teaching. I remember someone saying to me when I was going through they have like a summer workshop just before you start in your first year. And I remember someone saying to me, the day that you no longer get excited when you hear the buses pulling up, or you no longer hear the hustle bustle of kids and feel that excitement, is the day you need to quit. And it absolutely is the thing I kind of live by. I absolutely fell in love with just everything about the art of teaching. Doesn't mean it wasn't challenging. First year was, when I look back on it, I'm probably like most teachers, I'm surprised I survived. My
Yeah.
most challenging year was my second one. And when people ask what made me want to become an administrator, I didn't know that right away. But what really drew me to the opportunity to go into school-based leadership was the fact that I feel like I was saved as an educator in my second year by an assistant principal who kind of took me under her wing. It was a stressful year. There were a lot of things going on. I think I was starting to question whether education was for me or if I was a good fit for it. And she was the constant champion cheerleader in my corner. She would, lift me up when I was feeling down. She would cheer me on when the lessons went well. When I messed up, she was brave enough to give me very clear and direct feedback. And as a newbie amongst it was a very large school I was working in. I think over 85 teachers, for an
Wow.
assistant principal to invest in my journey and have confidence in me just absolutely kind of turned that ship for me. So I looked at going into school-based leadership as an opportunity to be able to pay that forward. And if I could do that for someone else, I believe in education. I believe in the hard work of educators. And if I have an opportunity to be able to help, whether it's a new teacher or a teacher who's been in education for a little bit, I'm honored to be able to pay that forward. Someone did it for me, so I'm happy to, do it for others.
That's awesome. Um, what you said you had a background in business. Is that correct?
Business administration is my bachelor's degree. Hmm.
So how did that play when you first, and did that play a part at all in when you're in the classroom? Like these skills I learned in business apply to the classroom.
John, that's a really good question. I think anytime you're working in, there is a part of customer service and the work that we do, especially as I've come into leadership, being able to communicate with your staff, with your families, your community, being able to host events, knowing how to reach out to other businesses in the community, talk to people that are not necessarily in education has been, I feel, helpful for me. I worked in advertising, so that had me like really out in my community talking to different people, different businesses, and learning how different managers might operate. So I think that plays a role a little bit. Also, you also see that I had this side of having been like in corporate America, having been out there. What was needed in the workforce was certainly something that was beneficial coming into education. Of course, we've seen like a huge shift with technology, and that wasn't there in the early 2000s when I was working in advertising. But being able to make the connection that there's a world that exists outside of the world of education, I think has been helpful for me, because while I absolutely am invested in the work of education, I can connect to people who aren't necessarily educators. That does help.
Yeah, that definitely, especially as a principal, connecting to your families, being able to communicate with your staff and with everybody, that plays such a huge role.
It does.
Can you go a little bit deeper into the importance of communication? Because I'm a big believer in the importance of communication. I think that communication is everything. I think that if
Mhm.
you're a good communicator, you could move a team forward in the right direction. If you know how to communicate, you could
Yeah.
take some hard thing to say to a group, and you could say it one way, and it hits like bam. Or you could say it another way, and it's like, okay, we could do it.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. I don't. It's how you deliver the message. Yeah.
And I have a very dear friend and mentor who says all the time, clear is kind. And I try to remember that when we have things that we're trying to communicate through, making sure that the messaging is something that is understandable, connectable, relatable is certainly important. I think communication is sort of it really is, it is both giving information, but it's also listening to information and being able to read a room and understand where people are in that moment. I think as an educator, you there were times, I think we all draw from the experiences we had. So when I was in the classroom, there were time and places where I felt that communication was strong, and I knew the things, I knew the vision, and I knew what was happening and the goals within the school, and I knew what the work we were trying to do, what we were trying to build toward for kids. And then there were also times where I felt very siloed, where I was just working and doing my daily job and loving what I did, but didn't feel connected to the greater work of the school, the greater work that was happening for kids. And I think that as a school leader, communication is is such an important piece, but it's also the piece that sometimes, without us intending for it to be, falls down that priority list a little bit. So it's remembering to boost that back up, because in our day to day, there's so many things that are important. We're taking care of people all day long. We're taking care of kids. We're making sure that good things are happening for kids on campuses, but not always. The communication might be the thing that we're doing last at the end of the day, or I'll get to that tomorrow, or things will happen. And I really think there's something that I believe in, and I'm not always sure that it lands right, but I do think transparency is important. Being transparent, owning what's happening, owning what needs to happen is really important when you're communicating with staff. And, I think that effort is always appreciated, and just trying to keep that on the forefront is important. I know myself, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'm probably about a 6 or a 7 when it comes to communication. I don't
Mm.
know. You'd have to ask my staff or ask the families in our community.
Yeah.
I might feel a little different. I do see people on TikTok who are doing like daily memos to their staff, and I'm so in awe of that, because I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you have time to get that
Yeah.
done? But I think when you think forward with what really helps to move the bigger work, it's being clear about what the goals are and communicating the work that's happening around it, so that everyone stays in tune to what's happening. Personally, myself, I'm a kind of an open door girl. So doors open, people can come in, talk. If they have concerns or questions, I hope they'll bring them my way. I do some updates for staff through like a newsletter that comes out every couple of weeks. We do updates, weekly phone calls to parents through a school messenger system to keep them in the know of what's happening at schools. And I think just email, and just making sure that we're staying on top of that. As an educator, I one time had a principal tell me, when I was an assistant principal, she was a principal, and she's like, when I became a principal, I swear my inbox grew like it like tripled. And it does happen. You are now on so many emails within a day, but keeping up with it, responding, taking care of it. I think the most important people we're taking care of are our staff, the people in our charge. So making sure that if they've got questions or concerns, that you're addressing those first and foremost. And then, of course, it would be your parents, your community, probably in that order.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. When
It
you
is.
when you're talking about the 3 times your mailbox and being a principal, it's a lot. But let's go back to when you were a teacher. Your first
Yes.
year as a teacher and your last year as a teacher.
Yes.
Okay. From that point, um, what would you say is you probably you grew tremendously. I'm figuring.
Oh my goodness. I always feel like I owe those kids in that first year, probably
Mhm.
second year, maybe even third year.
Me too.
Like, I'm so sorry about that.
I just had this.
It was the
Yeah, I
best I
just had
could
this
do.
conversation. I had this conversation with my daughter. She wants to be a teacher, and she was talking about how nervous she is about her first year. She's in student teaching right now. And I was like, don't worry. I go, that first year when I taught, I feel so
Yes.
bad. I felt like I
Yes.
didn't do a good enough job, and like I felt bad. And I was telling her it took me about 3 years to be like, okay,
Yes.
I kind of got a hold of it now, and I'm okay. And I grew. How was your growth from your first year to like, okay, I'm ready to leave the classroom?
So, can I just ask one question of you? What does your daughter want to teach?
She wants to
Does she
teach
know?
grades K through second.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah,
wonderful. The littles, that's so
littles.
sweet.
That's right.
Gosh, so having been a career changer, certainly I didn't go to college for teaching. So that certainly was its own learning curve. I was like a sponge in my first year. Anything anybody wanted to share, if they had a tip for me, I was trying it, trying to figure out my way. I was very fortunate. I worked with an amazing group of other eighth grade science. I taught eighth grade science, other eighth grade science teachers. There were 4 of us total. I had a couple in that group that just checked on me a lot, made sure I had what I needed, allowed me to watch them lead instruction in their room to see how to better organize things, how to coordinate labs in my own classroom. I had to be willing to put myself out there. And I mentioned it earlier. I was 32. I was a career changer. That is a little vulnerable. I don't care what age it is, you're vulnerable. But when you're in your 30s and you've had a career already, it's a little vulnerable to, there were people a lot younger than me doing this work and being really successful. So I had to be very open to trying to learn and open to receiving feedback and trying new things. I think when you come from another career where you've had success, there's also this feeling that being a newbie feels so vulnerable and you're just out there. But I tried to just put that aside and just say to myself, in 3 or 4 years, this won't feel this way. And also like recognizing the growth within myself. So when I was a brand new teacher, everything was hard. Putting together a lesson, putting together a lab, keeping up with grading, making sure that I kept up with email and did all the like managerial pieces that were required at my school, especially during pre-plan. There's all those like little courses and things you need to take and check off and sign here. And it was overwhelming. But as I got my feet under me and started to build a little more confidence, you have a lesson that you like knock out of the park, and suddenly you're like, okay, I'm doing it, it's okay. There's connections that you're making with the kids and they're getting it. You have that awesome lab and the kids are really speaking the language of science, would get me excited. And I could see that growth. But that doesn't mean, I guess for any new teacher, something I always say, and a lot of times, like if I'm on TikTok, I'm going live, a question I get asked a lot is like, what advice would you have? Is knowing that, there are going to be good days, there are good days, there are hard days, no matter whether you're 1 year in or 20 years into
Right.
education. It's kind of cyclical like that. But I think what I was able to see is I was like a sponge in the beginning, but I was also a sponge toward the end. There's always things to learn and people to learn from. And I can remember, I think I was in year 4. We had a teacher come new to us who had just come out of the University of Central Florida teaching program. She was like a rock star right out of the gate. And so learning from Charlotte was like amazing because she came in with all these ideas. So I think it's just you're like a sponge. I don't know that I ever felt like I was consistently a rock star, but I certainly had a lot of days where I felt like a rock star. And just being willing to learn and grow and do better in your practice.
And how did you know it was time to leave the classroom?
That was that was a tough one because I don't know that I felt ready when I left the classroom. It was sad. I was sad. I had started thinking about that, I think in year 5 or 6 of teaching. And in year 6, I actually made the commitment to go back and start getting my master's degree in education leadership. So I knew that would come eventually, right? Like I knew that would be the goal, but I didn't know when. My children were getting older. And I just sort of started to feel like the timing was right. And I was doing a lot of work and some projects with staff in our district level. So I got to know several coordinators and different people there. And they started talking to me about, when do you think you're going to go into school-based leadership? And I thought, oh no, it's going to be a few more years. And then an opportunity came up to take on a role. Our science program specialist for the district left. I taught science. And it also, one of the things about district roles, or at least in our district, when you take on a district role, you take on like 13 different hats. It's not just
Yeah.
solely one
Yeah.
one thing or one gig. You're taking on a lot of things. And the other piece to it was coaching. And I knew if I was going to be an effective school-based leader, I would need to learn how to coach classroom instruction and be effective in that role. And so my tug for about a year, I knew the position was opening because someone had kind of reached out and said, "Hey, in May, this position's going to open. We'd like you to think about it." And there was a tug about, this is a great opportunity for me to be able to spend time growing where I need to grow so I can be effective as a school leader. So I don't know that I was planning to leave the classroom and make that leap that quick. If I'm honest, I think I thought it would happen another year or two, maybe 3 years from that point. But because the position was opening, it became one of those now we're like now we're it's the position just wouldn't be there. I don't mean to say like now or never, that's like dramatic, but now or who knows, this position won't come back around again, or this opportunity. funny thing, so I wanted to say it was really important for me to stay until the end of the school year. And initially I was told the position's opening in May. We'd like for you to take it. I said, okay, for next school year. The position actually ended up opening at the end of March. Um, so when I, got the call, took the interview, got the position, that one of the things they said is, but we really like for you to come, the first part of April into the role. And I just could not leave my kids. And it's funny because I didn't know this then, but the person offering me the position had reached out to my principal and said, hey, just letting you know, we're going to offer Kelly the job, but we would like her to come now instead of waiting to come when the school year ends and come for next year. And he's like, well, you can ask her, but she's probably going to tell you no. And I did. I just could not leave my kids in April. I needed to ride the year out with them. I just couldn't imagine leaving them in the classroom, and stuck it out. They said, okay, but we need you to come right when the school year ends, and come work a couple of weeks, get prepared for the next year. And I was just like, absolutely, done deal. Fine, that works. So happened a little faster than I thought it might, but it
Like
was good.
I feel the same way where like same situation where I went back to school and I got my admin credential and I was just sitting on it and I started to feel like a rock star teacher. Like this is too easy for me now. Like this is easy. This
Yeah,
is becoming easy. And then, I started to think like, man, I wonder what out of the classroom position I'd be good at. I wonder what,
yeah,
and you start to feel that way. Then an opportunity pops up and then you're like, okay, here it is.
yeah,
Let's go ahead and jump on it. And
yeah.
that's what happened to me. The exact same story that you're saying. When I was a fifth grade teacher at the time, and I got a call saying that there's a dean position open at a middle school, high school, and I was like, yeah, let me apply to that. And
Oh,
then I got the job, and it's the same type of situation. You feel that low tug. There's a door that
hmm.
opens, and then you just kind of like, oh, let's see what happens. And then
Did
it
you
happened.
did you think you might not ever go, or were you? It was on your radar to go, but were you
I
just
thought this is what I thought. I was in the classroom for 18 years. So I
wow?
taught as
Yeah.
a classroom teacher for 18 years.
Oh,
I think I got my credential year maybe 12, maybe year 12, 13, something like that. I got my credential and I just sat on it. And I got it for salary point reasons. So if we get X amount of salary points, right? So I got it for salary point reasons. And I'm sitting on my admin credential. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't. And as time passed, I was like, I think it's time. I think it's time. And I just an opportunity opened up and then I became a dean of students. Then it was like, all right, here I am. And I don't know anything about this position really. And nobody likes the dean. Nobody likes the dean because you have to enforce a policy and work with all the behavior. Yeah, I went from everybody liking me and like, oh, Mr. Vergara, you're a great teacher to nobody liking you.
nobody wants to hear from you.
Yeah, and then you go from like you're with the teachers and you're eating lunch with your friends to like
Yes.
who am I eating lunch with? Like nobody.
And they're not sure you're the dean. So is it, they're not
Yeah,
quite
in the
sure
middle,
where
like
you
what
fit
are
in.
you? We don't
Yeah.
know. And I just was like, you know what? I'll just eat by myself. And it was whatever, it was a transition, but it was the same thing that you were saying was like opportunity presented itself. I
Yeah.
had the right credentials. I prepared myself. And I was
Yes.
like, oh, I could do it. I could
Yeah.
try to do it.
I grew so much in that year. Now, I will tell you, I also learned. So I spent a year then at our county office. And, but really, I say county office, but I was in schools every single day. So part of the job I had, in addition to coaching science instruction, I was their AVID coordinator for the district. Like I wore all these hats, but we were a team of teachers who walked schools that were close to going into corrective action. So we would go as a team and walk and give feedback, and so it was like a crash course for me because I'd never really coached instruction and got to be around amazing coaches who took time to teach me, but also really challenged me. Like, I remember one time my boss being, okay, you're going to lead this part of the conversation today. And I about had a heart, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready. She's like, you're ready, but you need to learn how to speak. You've got, this is what it's going to be like as a leader. And if we're leading schools, we have to be able to have hard conversations and do things. So the year that I was not at a school working for our county, probably the biggest professional growth of in 1 year I've had in my entire educational career, and probably in my entire professional career, because it really took me out of, and you talk about comfort zone. So I think when you kind of reach a level, like at my school, I was kind of a rock star teacher coming out. I came into an arena I didn't know very much about at all, and had to pick up on it quick, and surrounded by a lot of people who knew a lot more than I did. And I needed to learn to keep up with them, or I'd be the person on the team who was like, she ain't that great. Like, you have to prove, it challenged me in so many ways. And I'm really appreciative of that. I did learn that I am school based. That's my heart. Like, not being at a school was, I didn't enjoy that. It was weird to go to an office and be at a cubicle every day. Like, it was not me. And thankfully we have people who do that every day, and it is a good fit for them. For me, I like the sound of the bells ringing and the kids and lunch duty and all of those things. Like, I like being at a school, and I really missed it, but I knew I needed that year so that when I went to a school to be a leader, I could be effective and really do the things that a leader is required to do at a school.
Did you deal with imposter syndrome?
With what?
Imposter syndrome? Like you felt like as though you didn't you're in this position, but you're not really have the skills, or you don't have, you're not going to cut it, and everybody else is doing great, but
Yes,
I'm the fake one in this group.
I did. And we would do, so our team would come together every Friday and do these scenarios and work and give coach each other in our job. And, and so I think if I felt like an imposter, those were the days where I certainly looked like the newbie, and certainly, wanted to, um, grow myself, because it was, so we would come together on Fridays. There would be these, we'd all be in one room together, all the coaching teams, and there would be different scenarios, and we'd kind of be put on the spot to get up in front of everybody and talk about how we'd solve this, or in real, like, with in front of them, have a coaching conversation, talk about what we would say. And what it taught us was, in those moments where you're having conversations with leaders, how do you have an effective conversation, connect with the leader, tell them really what's happening in a way that doesn't offend, upset, connect with them so that you can continue to keep doing good work in their school alongside them. And those Fridays were the thing I hated when I started in it. Like, I'd cringe a little bit because it was so out of my comfort zone. But when I got better at it, and maybe had a Friday that I felt like it did well, that made me want to have another Friday. I really wanted to keep trying and keep doing. But it's certainly, when you don't know and you're kind of trying to pick up those pieces and learn, it was intimidating and challenging. And I think about it when I think of, like, our students in classrooms, and when learning becomes overwhelming and we shut down. Like, I think of that, like, it's hard as adults sometimes when we're challenged and we're put on the spot, and we're not quite to the level everybody else is at, but yet we're expected to perform.
Yes.
And if you don't have the skills to do it, what that looks like sometimes for teenagers, the kids I taught, and certainly humbles you a little bit,
Absolutely.
or a lot.
And then you jump into being an assistant principal, you said. How many years did you do a assistant principal?
Assistant principal for 3 years. I was, so I taught, my entire teaching time was middle school, and I was an assistant principal at middle school for 3 years. And then I got my first principalship at a feeder elementary to the middle school, where I was an assistant principal. And so in a lot of ways, there was a little bit of a moment like, who elementary me, like I remember when they so our district has a pool, so you become an assistant principal, then there are criteria you need to meet to get into the principal pool, which once you're in the principal pool, it allows you to apply for principal positions. But the way we kind of did it at that time, you were in the pool and you went before a panel of people, and then they kind of made decisions about where you would go interview. So I went to kind of the panel, I got into the pool, and then got the call like, hey, we want you to go interview at this elementary school. And I was a little bit like, I don't know. Are you sure? Me? And I can just remember the person who'd called me and said, we think you bring a lot of strength that the school is needing right now. You know the community because you're an assistant principal at the feeder school. So a lot of the parents, the families know you already. And we think that that would be really beneficial there. So just go give it a try. What she said to me is just go try. And then I think she said, a couple of other things like, so when we went when we went I guess when the principal of the school that I became principal at was retiring, so anytime a principal's retiring, our superintendent goes to speak with the staff at the school to see what their needs are around what they'd like to see in the next principal. So then I remember she said to me, the person who called me and said, you're going to go interview next week, blah, 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 this time. And she said, when we went to speak to the staff, they said one of the things that was most important is they want someone who's really strong in K-2 literacy. And then I'm like, girl, you're calling me, like, I'm like, I don't. So it was like a full immersion into what I could, learn, connect with, do. But she's like, just go try, just go sit for the interview and see what happens. So they usually will have like 3 or 4 people sit for the interview, and then the panel at that school picks the principal. But so that stuck with me, even though of course you don't learn K1 and 2 literacy until you're in an elementary school, but it stuck with me for the first couple of years that was something very valuable to the staff there and something I needed to learn because I certainly hadn't had any experience with it, not having been an elementary teacher.
Yeah. And I guess this is one of a personal question for me. What is harder, to be an assistant principal or principal?
So I'll share a couple of things, and I share this very openly with people. And we were assistant principal, you have a lot, the discipline sometimes is a huge piece that takes up a lot of time. You have other pieces that you're trying to do. In our school, we do, like, I still do teacher evaluations. We actually have the same number of teacher evaluations, principal and assistant principals. Our assistant principals handle discipline. There are 3 of them, and each handles for their grade level. And that is a huge piece. And so I'm now principal at the middle school where I was an assistant principal. So it does help that I've walked in their shoes and I understand and I know sometimes the day-to-day bogged down piece of discipline, and try to help with that. I do recognize that they're juggling 90,000 plates in the air, and that it's important to make sure that I'm supportive and helpful to them. Our district has certain expectations. A big one is that we are in classrooms, learning and supporting and, coaching and doing all of those things. So it's always been a high priority for me. I think the year I spent working at our district office really instilled that in me, because it certainly was evident in schools where the leader understood where they fell in the teaching and learning spectrum, I guess, of a school, where other schools, you could tell leaders were a little more hands off with that. So it was always a high priority for me that I have a good thumb, a good understanding of what's happening in classrooms for kids. So we do try to work together on some of those 90,000 things the assistant principals have to do so that I can help support them so they can meet the district expectation of helping to coach as well and be good classroom instructional leaders. I would say a big challenge for principal is the buck stops with me. it wasn't me. Not that you ever would, but you own everything. So there are things I would never do myself, but I apologize for, because I'm sorry that happened, because I have to own it. And along with that, you get all of the accolades and all of the great things that happen too, and all of the celebrations. You get that, like, you're the person that's recognized for it. But in the face of challenges, you're also the person held responsible and accountable for things. And sometimes that can, you know I always support my support teachers and staff. Our teachers do amazing things for kids every day, but that doesn't mean that there's not some oopses that happen in there. And of course, sitting beside them, speaking to the challenges that happen. I'm happy to do that. Sometimes it is a little challenging, because the things that happen aren't necessarily things you could control or were aware of. But ultimately, you being being the leader of the school, it is your responsibility to take accountability for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On social media, there's always this talk about admin,
Yeah.
about how admin are the worst. Admin don't do anything. Um, they're just in their
Yes.
office or whatever. And how? What do you think about that narrative?
I don't like the narrative, but I absolutely understand it. And if I'm being really honest, there might have been a time or two when I was in the classroom, I felt that way too.
Yeah,
So I don't ever take offense to it when I hear it's out there, or somebody say, well, what are you doing? All that? Like, I don't, because if you haven't walked in the shoes or haven't been closely connected to it, you don't know. And I can remember sometimes as a teacher being frustrated that a disciplinary action didn't get processed fast enough. Well, what's he doing all day, or what's she doing? Like, I'd be lying if I said I never felt that way, because I didn't know. I didn't know what went on beyond, like, my classroom walls and the walls of my neighbor's classroom. Like, that was it.
yeah,
So I get that, because if we don't know what's going on, we can feel that way. I try not to take offense to it. I think that's part of why I started on social media talking about being a principal. One of the things that I really, in addition, I say there's always three reasons kind of why I share my life, my, daily life as a principal on TikTok, is I want to be able to showcase education in a in a positive light. I believe in it. I want it shown positively. People sometimes give me criticism for not showing the real things. Where's the fights? Where's this? Well, they're happening, but I will never post about that here. You're going to have to go somewhere else to find them.
hmm
But that's kind of my first thing, is showcasing education positively. But the second thing, it's really important to me to showcase principals, assistant principals. We're people too. We make mistakes just like everybody else. We're doing our best. We have moments where we feel the weight of the world. It's no different than any other role, probably in any business, but certainly in education. There are days where we feel like we failed. The choices, the decisions we make have a huge impact, and sometimes they're not the best choices. When sometimes we're doing the best we can. And
sure.
I like to showcase that that we're real people, and we're really trying the best we can. And it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean uh that we're like these people that nobody knows. Like, there's always the principal, like it's this strange person sitting behind a desk. Like, that's not who we are. We're really trying the best we can.
hmm
And but I do get that. I used to hear people say the dark side. And when I went from teaching to administration, so many people make the comment, you're going to the dark side. You're going to the dark side. And I didn't quite, I got what they were trying to say. I understand there is a little bit of an unknown. And I think as we've shifted, when I started in education, it felt like principals and assistant principals were more managers. So it felt a little more like it's the dark side. It's a thing that's going on. I think as we've made a shift to being instructional leaders and being in planning times with teachers and in classrooms, we show our vulnerability. I don't know all the things. I sometimes have to go into a math lesson and have the teacher teach it before I can help a kid. Like, I don't know all the things. And certainly I think together it's what makes a really powerful school community. But there is a lot about admin, but I guess
You
that's
know,
what happens.
let's talk about social media. Let's get into social media really quickly here. You said you got into social media a year ago. Is that?
So right, I had a TikTok probably. I had TikTok probably for a couple of years, but I'm a little bit of a like a DIY. That's kind of my little thing that I love, and that's what I was sharing initially. So I started it was kind of for that, and but started sharing about being a principal. It was a year ago, January. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's how you came in on my feed, a day in the life of middle school principal. And it was just you, you were walking around and you like, oh, I did this, I went to a meeting, I did here, I did that. You're just doing all the things. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then another one, a day in the life of middle school principal, and you had something new. It seemed like there was something different. You'd ask a question about something or a show that you
Yeah.
watch, bring it back to like principals, admin, or people. We watch
Yeah.
shows. We like shows.
Yes.
We like to talk
Yes.
about. And you have hobby. You like to clean. It looks like
Yes,
you
I
like.
do.
Yeah,
Yes.
you like to clean, and so um we're people, right? But so
Yeah.
that's how you came with my feed, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting." And you were always positive. Everything that there was nothing negative about what you were saying. It was just
Yeah.
like, "This is what the day is. This is what I do. This is what it looks like." Um, and I appreciated that. I was like, "Oh, this is good stuff. We
Oh,
need we need this stuff, And so
well,
that's
that's
how it came up in
thank
my
you.
feed.
Thank you. I uh, like I said, I do keep it positive. That's intentional. That's by design. I think there's enough negative out there, and if people want to find the negative, they can certainly do that.
Mhm.
It does not mean the job is always sunny and bright, and but those are the things. I, I I I think what we want to think forward with is the things that keep us in the work, the positiveness, the impact we're having, the change we're making for kids. All of that is something that I'm very passionate about, and I've been passionate about. And I'm 19 years in and feeling like I still absolutely get excited when educators come together, learn together, do great things by kids, and I probably always will be that way. So I've always in my career, when there's been an opportunity to showcase positive things that are happening, I've always taken them because I feel that there's enough negative that flies around and enough negative that's out there. If we can have an opportunity to showcase things that are happening positively, why not do that? So it kind of started that way, and I didn't know how people would receive it initially. So I saw people doing these like day in the life vlogs, and I just thought, it'd be kind of cool to do it. Little funny story. I think it took me 2 or 3 days to record that first one because I just didn't know what I was doing. And I'm like, let me just try this. Let me just do this. And it's quirky and weird. When I look back at some of those, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
But people connected with them.
yeah.
A very funny one. So we get a good chuckle out of it at my school. And I think it was the second video I ever did about being a principal. We were doing a celebration for our staff with ice cream floats. And we have these big blue coolers. They're coolers, they're not trash cans, but they're on wheels. And we use them for athletics. And we put the sodas in it and then wheeled these things around. And I got so much hate because they're like, you're serving your teachers out of trash cans. Who would want it? Like, you know how it goes. Like the
Yeah.
video
Oh, yeah.
just took off and went crazy. So now every time we bring out the blue coolers, they're like, there's the trash cans. There's the trash cans. It was a funny thing that we kind of laugh about because it was not the thing that I thought people would connect with. I actually thought it was a cute video. We like took floats around, gave to teachers, and some teachers are in the video holding their floats, but the coolers on wheels just sent TikTok into a crazy space. But I think also one of the things as I've as I've grown in posting on TikTok and kind of found a community, that has changed. Because initially, and I know when we kind of talked before this, I said I quit TikTok about 19 different times. I quit all the time because I'm like, oh, forget it. But it's been less and less probably in the last 6 months because it's about finding a community of support.
Yes.
So initially, TikTok's just throwing your videos out to whomever. So everybody's like chiming in about these things that look like trash cans that I'm serving my staff. But over time, people who want the video, who want the thing you're doing, who feel connected to the work, start to follow, start to see the algorithm kind of picks it up. So now it's a much more, I dare I say, loving, like a sweet community that
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy. In
Yeah.
the beginning, it was very different. It was like, oh my gosh, we did a thing. I got so much hate for this. We did, I saw this cute thing, these little, like notes, like, thank you for a great week. We love you. And we took my admin team and we put them on like cardstock and put them under the windshield of people's car on a Friday afternoon. And TikTok hated it. Hated it. They were like, who wants to take a piece of paper off on a Friday afternoon? I just want to get out of there. Like, people came for me in all kinds of ways with it.
Oh
So,
my God, yeah.
but certainly the journey has been interesting. And I think what I've certainly come to appreciate is over time, I like found my, like the niche, the people who want the thing that I'm doing, and the people who don't, just it just doesn't show up on their feed, or they're less likely to comment now, which I'm better with. But
Yeah.
certainly in the beginning it was very interesting.
That was the same with me. I've been doing it for about 2 years. It's been about 2 years.
Really?
And the first year was a little rocky. It was like a
Yeah.
little, you like you said, you put out a video. I say
Yeah.
stuff like students with difficult behavior follow people over rules. That's what I say. I say
Yeah.
students with difficult behavior have, they need to be taught about emotional intelligence. They shouldn't just be like, oh, let's send this kid out, let's give him detention, let's expel him. I talk about these things. This is what I talk about. And at first, it was like so much hate. I would get so much hate. These kids are ruining it for everybody else and they need to be expelled and like all of this crazy hate. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I wrong? Am I wrong in what I'm saying? And like, I was like, man, do I need to stop saying this? And it made me question my own beliefs because I was I was paying too much attention to the comments and then internalizing some of the things that they were saying to me. And it made me alter my beliefs a little bit. And I had to be like, no, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And whoever wants to hear it is going to hear it. And whoever
Yeah.
doesn't. So I
Mm-hmm.
kept on, kept on, kept on.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get through year one. And then that's how the podcast came about. After year one, I was talking to a friend and they were like, hey, you should start a podcast and just invite educators and talk about education. I was like, you know what? That's a great idea. So this year two, I started my podcast. This is year 3 on TikTok. And
Wow.
it's been an interesting journey. And you're right. After a while, you start to build a community. After a while, you start to find the same people that like your videos, that make comments. They're almost there to help you and back you up if something goes crazy in the comments.
Yes.
Well, that's what I've noticed, and then when I see stuff too, I'm like, hey, that I'll go in the comments and I'll do the same.
Yes.
But it's been an interesting ride. I like it, but it is difficult. And I always told myself when it feels like a job, when I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's a job,
Mm-hmm.
then I need to stop because I never want to have the. I don't want this as a job. Like I enjoy having conversations. I enjoy having conversations with educators on my podcast.
Yeah.
I enjoy making clips and putting them out there, and for the benefit of both of us. So
Yes.
I'm gonna make clips for you. This is gonna go out,
Yay.
and there's gonna be clips, and it's gonna be attached to you, and people can click it and find
Yeah.
you. And I
Oh,
enjoy
awesome.
all of that stuff.
Yes.
I enjoy making videos about how to work with students with difficult behavior.
Yeah.
But when it becomes a job,
Yeah.
then it's over. Then I'm done.
We can, I've taken a couple weeks off at a time for, sometimes it does get that way. I do think one of the things that surprised me the most, like, I think I expected, you are really putting yourself out there when you go on social
Oh
media
yeah.
the
Oh
way that
yeah.
we do. You're putting and I would have never, like, in October 2023, if someone would have said to me, in a couple months you're going to start recording yourself and putting it out there for the world to see your voice, and my voice annoys me. I'm not a thin girl. I'm not young. I would have never pictured myself doing it. I would have said, you're crazy. I wasn't even comfortable. Just pictures being taken and being out there. What do you mean I'm going to start doing this? You're really putting yourself out there. And I think there certainly is something that is so appreciated about that when people do. I think when I, and even now, like when I'm on social media, I can dismiss and maybe tune out. Like, it's not so bothersome if it's somebody who's not in education making comments. I think what is a little tough sometimes is educators coming at other educators. And I don't know why that, you know, I don't know why that's a thing. We're all in it for the same thing. We might not agree on viewpoints, but I've seen some of these, like, what are they? They're like a side by side. They're not a side, they're a
A
snip. What's
stitch.
the
A
a
stitch.
stitch? Thank you. Like stitching of other people's things and doing, and I think if you're doing it in a positive light to showcase it, but to kind of like pick people apart, it's a little hard sometimes, especially when it's another educator doing that to someone, because we're same team. You might not agree, but could we not agree that we are all doing really hard work, doing what's best for kids? We might not agree on certain particulars of how something is done, but that those are the ones that I think are a little more hurtful when it's educators, like coming at educators. I think people in the other who aren't in education, they're going to say whatever they're going to say. That's just kind of how it rolls sometimes. And they might not always connect to what we're saying, but it's educators who sometimes feel the need to come at other educators. That's a little hard.
And then when did you start going live? Because I'm a big chicken when it comes to live. I'm a big chicken when it comes to live.
Gosh, I think it was summertime, maybe fall. And I just started. I want to say it might have been like August. We are getting ready to go back to school. I think I did the first one I ever did. It's a little intimidating, but I have to tell you, now I've come to, I think I enjoy the lives more than I enjoy the videos. There's nothing really to edit or do after. It's just a conversation, and people ask some really good questions. You really get to connect and feel connected to people. And what's really cool, like when I go live, a lot of times the people are commenting are people I feel like I already know in this space, because they were on my last live and we were talking about different things. So
Yeah.
I think the first time I ever went live was last summer, and then like around October, November, I was trying to do it a little more frequently. And then when the new year came, I'm like, I'm going to do it every Monday night. And I've totally flopped on that. I think I only did it once in February, just because we have games, we have different Monday nights. I'm like, I can't commit to that. I'm not getting home till 7 and I don't want to hop in. But I do enjoy that. Once I got past the whole being out there and, what if no one what if no one showed, like, you always have those worries too. And but as long as the conversation's flowing, I actually enjoy the connection. I feel like it's a little more authentic than the videos and posting and doing.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I feel about the podcast, where
Yeah.
it's more authentic. I'm sitting here and
Mhm.
I'm talking and we're having a conversation, and um I think I enjoy that a lot. And I
Yeah.
can see, I guess live could be the same way. I'm just a big chicken when it comes to live. I've done it a
When
few
you
times, but I'm like, I'm like, what do I say? Like, what am I doing? And I see other people, like, if you're a woman, you can put makeup on and you can, like,
Yeah,
do things and stuff like that. I'm a
yeah,
man, and so what am I I'm
yeah.
just gonna sit there and stare, like,
So I can't see. So I probably do the makeup, but I have to wear readers to see. So I'm like, I'd be having the readers and right up close to the phone if I were trying to put makeup on. So but yes, you can find. I did do one where I was cooking the other day,
Yeah,
and I really just did that because I had not gone live in so long, and I really need to cook dinner. I'd been at work late, and that one was okay. People were like, "Yeah, that one was pretty good," but I felt like I was trying to do too much. Like I got to be a little more like I got to look and not be like trying to grab the pepper in my arms in the way and it's
yeah,
blocking the can. Like I'm not that savvy with it. So you just try to figure it out. But it's I think what it does again, it's like building a community and talking to people who I hope come into the live or people who want to connect and talk about education and connect on ideas and I get a lot of questions about interview tips and people who are like going to get their degree and, what should I do next? And people who are going to become, student interns or they tell me about how their internship's going. So it is kind of a fun way to hear from people that you've heard from before and you kind of remember, oh, I remember, yeah, you're a media specialist out west. How is that going? You get to really I don't want to say get to know them because it's weird because we've never met face to face, but you connect in a way that is pretty unique on social media. That's for sure.
that's awesome. Well, Callie, we're coming toward the end of the podcast, and toward the end of the podcast, I always ask my guests, what are 3 tips that you would give to future educators? This is student teaching season right now, we got all these student teachers. What kind of tips would you give them?
So I think the first one I would say is to give yourself grace. Understand that there's going to be good days and there's going to be not good days, and that's absolutely normal. I remember a mentor saying to me, there are going to be days where you want to cry, or maybe you do cry on the car ride home. Know that tomorrow is a new day. It's a new opportunity to do something different. One of the beauties of the work we do is no 2 days are the same. So when it's been not a good day, give yourself grace and then you just got to let it go. Know that tomorrow's a new day. You're going to put your best foot forward. I think another piece that I'd really encourage is find your people, find a person or your people, the adult people in the space that you're going into. Try to connect with someone. Teaching can be a lonely job if you don't have people to lean on. And one of the mistakes I kind of made early on, I was so busy and trying to do all the things. I found myself eating lunch alone a lot in my room while I'm trying to answer emails and my planning time just running all my errands. And I started to make a commitment that every Friday I'd leave my classroom and go up to the teacher's lounge and have lunch with everybody. Number one, because they need to know who I was. Like, who's that girl who never. But number two, it also helped me build relationships with other teachers. I would say, though, you need to find one or two people who will really have your back in this work. The person you can go to when you've had a rough day, the person you can go to when that lesson just rocked is really important. So try to find that person. And then just have faith in yourself. Just know that if you're doing the best you can do and you're making the best decisions you can make for kids, you're doing a great job. And don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to retire the old things because sometimes things don't work any longer. But just know that if you're giving the kids, if you're doing your best and giving the kids everything that you can give them, you're absolutely doing amazing work and we're just grateful. I'm grateful every time I hear that a teacher is stepping into the classroom for the first time. I'm grateful that we have amazing people coming into this field and stepping into our schools and doing great things for kids.
Absolutely. Well, Callie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was great to have you here. And I really
It was
enjoyed our conversation.
It was so fun. And I just have to tell you, I've been a follower of yours. I absolutely love the messaging you do. It inspires so many of us. to really build those relationships with kids and not give up on children. And the first video I ever saw of yours, you were out on the playground trying to get a little boy to come
Yeah.
back inside.
Yeah.
And your conversation with him, like you just held the camera so we could just see you talking. But I immediately connected to,
Yeah.
he's just saving a boy right now. He
Yeah.
is just in this to save a boy right now and get him
That's
where he
it.
needs to be. And
That's
thank you for
awesome.
all that you do.